So let me start by talking about a life with neutrons and wilderness. You all know what a neutron is, right? Yeah, it's those little tiny things that run around, and if you get them in the right circumstance and the right piece of metal, all hell breaks loose. Anyway, I had a life with neutrons and then with wilderness as well. I had a degree in physics from Michigan Tech, and Barb and I decided we wanted to settle somewhere in the Rocky Mountain West. So I took a job with the Atomic Energy Commission at a place called the National Reactor Testing Station. My project had to do with reactor safety studies. We had 4 reactors operated by remote control from a half-mile away because they had no shielding and no safety systems. We were kind of the hot shots, sort of like the test pilots. We had these things to play with and shake them out, push the outside of the envelope. And for a young kid with a physics degree, this was a boyhood dream, working with nuclear reactors and pushing them to their limits. We ran supercritical power excursions where the power would zoom from 0 to sometimes millions of watts to study the effect on reactor cores and study the dynamics of the fission process. I got to sit at the controls of one of the reactors in 1962 and run the ultimate super prompt critical power excursion. Man, was that fun. What was also fun, however, was the fact that Barb and I had moved to a region that you can only describe as magical and wondrous. We were literally in our backyards. We had Yellowstone and Grand Teton National Parks, the Snake River, the Salmon River, the Sawtooth Mountains. For a couple of kids who had grown up in the densely populated state of Rhode Island, this was heaven. I decided I wanted to tell the world or show the world what it was I was finding in these areas. So I bought a too expensive camera and began taking photos. My inspiration came from these books that were being published in the early 1960s by the Sierra Club. Large format picture books featuring photographers like Ansel Adams and Elliot Porter and Phil Hyde and others. And to me, they not only inspired, but kind of challenged me to make my work as important as theirs. The man behind these publications was named David Brower, who was the executive director of the Sierra Club. And he became my mentor and later a very good friend. One of the first battles I got involved in was a place called Hell's Canyon. It forms the border of Idaho and Oregon, and it's the deepest gorge in North America, nearly 2,000 feet deeper than the Grand Canyon. And it's a pretty amazing place. Well, of course, being a nice steep gorge, some engineers and power companies thought, wow, we got to build another dam here. They proposed to build one nearly as high as the Glen Canyon Dam, which had already wrought a lot of damage to the Colorado River system. Well, it would have put Hell's Canyon under hundreds of feet of water before anyone really got to know what it was like. So a handful of us got together one evening in Idaho Falls over, of course, a few six-packs of beer. And we decided, no, we got to do something and see if we can stop the building of this dam that would destroy a place that not many people have had a chance to get to know yet. So we formed the Hells Canyon Preservation Council. We really didn't know what the hell we were doing, but we knew we had to do something. But we had a big problem. Not many people outside of Idaho or Oregon knew where Hells Canyon was. And even people living in those states were barely aware of it. So we had to start a publicity campaign, mostly to get the public to realize that this was a place worth protecting, like the Grand Canyon. Well, I learned that this man, you remember Arthur Godfrey? Yeah, he was one of the top people in the entertainment field in the 1960s. And I learned that he was also many times talking about conservation issues in his programs. So I wrote a letter to him. I had no idea of how to contact him. I just wrote Arthur Godfrey, care of CBS, New York, New York. There was no zip codes then. I never expected to get an answer. 4 weeks later, I got a letter from Arthur saying, I'd love to visit Hells Canyon. Well, I had already burned up my 2 weeks vacation with the AEC, so I couldn't go on that trip, but we made arrangements to take him into the canyon, and he got to experience some of the wonders of Hells Canyon. And on his radio show every morning for the first 5 or 6 days when he got back, he did nothing but rave about it. And that was the beginning to inform the public about what was going on there and the need to save it. I'd also started writing articles and using my photographs to reach people in publication. Audubon magazine, which at that time had a huge circulation and was a top-notch conservation magazine, and a beautifully published printed magazine as well. They were doing my article coming out in the January 1970 issue. I was in New York in the fall of 1969, went to the office, and the editor had just gotten page proofs, and their printing was beautiful. It really did justice to your photographs. So I gathered up a bunch of these and I jumped on a plane to Washington. I had set up a meeting with this man, Bob Packwood, who was the newly elected senator from Oregon. So new, in fact, he joked later when I met him that he was still having trouble finding the men's room in the Senate office building. Anyway, I sat in Bob's office and showed him these pictures, and he went through them page by page, looking at them very carefully. And then he looked up, and what he said next should be put on a plaque, put on a monument overlooking Hells Canyon. He said, "Holy shit, is this in my state?" No lie. In 1971, Barb and I took Packwood and his wife on a raft trip for 6 days through Hells Canyon. We also had the CBS News team with Richard Threlkeld there, and they did a marvelous story for broadcast about Hells Canyon. So our publishing and presenting to the public was reaching more and more people. The next year, in 1972, I took Pete Seeger on a 6-day raft trip, and Pete was wonderful. Every night he serenaded us with song. He also wrote a song about Hell's Canyon. Well, Bob Packwood introduced the bill. Actually, he went through 2 or 3 versions of it, and they had to hold hearings on it. I even put on a suit and tie and went to Washington to testify. It took 8 long years, but we got the bill passed, and there is now the Hell's Canyon National Recreation Area and Wilderness that was established in 1975. Well, another environmental battle occurred at the same time we were fighting Hell's Canyon. And this was in an obscure, not very well-known mountain range north of Sun Valley called the White Cloud Mountains. One of the largest mining companies in the world wanted to dig a huge open pit mine in this wilderness. I made a backpacking trip in there and did a photo essay for Smithsonian Magazine about this particular battle. We had another organization, again over a few beers, the Greater Sawtooth Preservation Council. The Sawtooth Mountains were not far from here, and they were scheduled to be classified as a wilderness area. So the proposed legislation went all into one big package that would protect the White Clouds as well. And it happened. It took, however, 47 years to get wilderness area status for the White Cloud Mountains. This is the exact spot where the mining company was going to dig a mile-long, 700-foot deep open pit mine. I love this quote because it's really true, isn't it?